Hey, beautiful souls, are you ready for a journey from heartbreak to hope? Tonight, I'm taking you deep into the mystical world of the Shadowpine Pack, where ancient bloodlines run thick with magic and mate bonds can either heal or destroy. Meet Lyra Nightshade, a name that once commanded respect in the most powerful werewolf pack in North America. Tonight, that name means nothing. Tonight, her world shatters like moonlight on broken glass. You see, dear listeners, rejection by your fated mate isn't just heartbreak for our kind. It's a severing of the very essence that makes us whole. It's watching your soul split in two while everyone you've ever loved stands witness. But here's what I know about strong women like Lyra, and maybe like you, sometimes we have to lose everything to discover who we really are. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the most devastating endings. So settle in, because this is a story about second chances, ancient magic, and learning that your worth was never dependent on someone else's ability to see it. This is about finding your pack, your power, and the love that was always meant to be yours. Are you ready to howl at the moon with me? Chapter 1. The harvest moon hung low and blood-red above the Shadowpine territory, casting everything in crimson shadows. How fitting for the night my life would end. I stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, my heart hammering against my ribs as Alpha Kieran Blackthorn raised his hand to silence the gathered pack. 300 wolves fell quiet, their eyes reflecting the firelight like scattered stars. This was supposed to be our night. The night we'd finally claim each other before the moon goddess and seal our destined bond. My pack. Kieran's voice carried across the clearing, deep and commanding as always. But tonight, there was something else. Something that made my wolf whimper and press low in my chest. Tonight, under this sacred moon, I must address a matter of great importance. My stomach dropped. This wasn't the speech we'd rehearsed. This wasn't how mate ceremonies began. Kieran's eyes found mine across the circle, and in them I saw nothing. No warmth, no recognition, no trace of the man who'd whispered promises against my skin just hours before. The mate bond that had hummed between us like a live wire for 3 years suddenly felt cold. The moon goddess speaks to us in mysterious ways, he continued, his gaze sliding away from me like I was nothing more than smoke. And sometimes, she shows us that what we thought was destiny was merely preparation.
No. No, no, no.
I, Alpha Kieran Blackthorn, reject. Stop. The word tore from my throat before I could stop it, raw and desperate. Every head in the circle turned toward me, and I felt 300 pairs of eyes like physical weight. Kieran, please. Not like this. His jaw tightened. I reject Lyra Nightshade as my mate and Luna of the Shadowpine Pack. The world tilted. The mate bond, that golden thread that had connected us since I turned 18, snapped so violently I gasped and stumbled backward. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out half my soul. But worse than the physical agony was watching Kieran step aside, revealing the woman who'd been hidden behind him. Seraphina Ashworth. Blonde, beautiful, powerful, and, until tonight, my best friend. Sarah? My voice came out as barely a whisper. She had the grace to look ashamed, her blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. But she didn't move away from Kieran's side.
She didn't speak.
Seraphina is my true mate, Kieran announced, his arms sliding around her waist with a possessiveness that made bile rise in my throat. The moon goddess has shown me the error of my ways. The pack erupted in whispers and shocked gasps. Some faces showed sympathy, others confusion, but a few, too many, looked relieved. Like they'd been waiting for this moment. Like they'd known something I hadn't. Lyra. My father's voice cut through the chaos. Elder Marcus Nightshade stepped forward, his weathered face grim. As the pack's lead tracker and one of Kieran's most trusted advisors, his word carried weight. Accept the rejection with dignity.
Dignity.
I looked around the circle at the faces I'd known since childhood. The pack that was supposed to be my family, my future subjects when I became Luna. Not one of them stepped forward to defend me. Not one questioned their alpha's decision. The reality hit me like a physical blow. this had been planned, orchestrated. I was the only one who hadn't known. Lyra Nightshade, accept your rejection, Alpha. The words tasted like ash and betrayal. But let the record show, this pack will rue this decision. Kieran's eyes flashed with anger at my defiance, but I was already turning away. Away from the ceremony that should have been mine. Away from the mate who'd throw me aside like garbage. Away from the life I'd spent 25 years building. Lyra, wait. Seraphina's voice followed me. I spun around, and for the first time in my life, I let my wolf surface in front of the pack. My eyes blazed silver-white, and power rippled off me in waves that made the nearest wolves step back. Don't.
You dare.
Each word dripped with the authority of my bloodline, the same bloodline that had founded this pack, that had bled for these lands, that had given everything to keep these people safe. You made your choice, Seraphina. Live with it. I turned and walked into the forest, my spine straight and my head high, even as my heart shattered with every step. But here's what they didn't know, dear listeners. What they couldn't have known. The Nightshade bloodline carries secrets older than the Shadowpine pack itself. Magic that goes deeper than typical werewolf abilities. Power that's been dormant in our line for 3 generations. And nothing awakens ancient magic quite like betrayal. As I disappeared into the shadows between the pine trees, the temperature dropped 10 degrees, and every wolf in that circle felt it. A chill that had nothing to do with autumn, and everything to do with the storm I was about to become. Because they'd forgotten something crucial about the Nightshade name. Chapter 2. I ran through the night until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, finally collapsing beside a moonlit creek 20 miles from pack territory. The rejection wound throbbed in my chest like a physical injury, each heartbeat sending fresh waves of agony through the severed mate bond. For the first time since childhood, I was truly alone. The forest felt different here, older, wilder, touched by magic that had nothing to do with pack boundaries or alpha commands. Ancient pine trees stretched toward the star-drunk sky like cathedral spires, their shadows deep enough to hide secrets. Or broken wolves. I should have been planning my next move. Where to go, how to survive as a lone wolf in a world that didn't tolerate rogues. Instead, I found myself replaying every moment of the last 3 years, searching for signs I'd missed. Had Kieran ever really loved me? Or had I been so desperate to fulfill the destiny everyone expected, the Alpha's daughter becoming Luna, that I'd imagine the tenderness in his touch, the promises whispered in the dark? You're pathetic, Lyra. The words echoed off the water, harsh and familiar. My mother's voice, though she'd been dead for 10 years. A true Nightshade would never grovel for a man's affection. Maybe she was right. Maybe I deserved this. My head snapped up, every instinct screaming danger. A figure emerged from the tree line, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid grace that marked him as a shifter. But his scent was wrong. Foreign. Not Shadowpine pack. Easy, he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my bones. I'm not here to hurt you. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the protest from my exhausted muscles. Then what do you want? He stepped into the moonlight, and my breath caught. He was stunning. Dark hair that looked like it had never met a comb, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of storm clouds. But it was more than his physical appearance. Power radiated off him in waves that made my wolf sit up and take notice. This was no ordinary wolf. You're on Crescent Moon territory, he said, crossing his arms over his chest. Technically, that makes you a trespasser. But given the emotional storm you're broadcasting to every supernatural creature within a 5-mile radius, I'm guessing you have bigger problems than border violations. Heat flooded my cheeks. Newly rejected wolves were notorious for their inability to control their emotional output, like a radio stuck on the heartbreak station, broadcasting our pain to anyone with supernatural senses. I'm sorry, I mumbled, hating how small my voice sounded. I'll leave. I didn't know. Did I say you had to leave? He tilted his head, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You're Lyra Nightshade. It wasn't a question. Somehow, this stranger knew who I was. How do you? Your reputation precedes you. Best tracker in the Pacific Northwest, daughter of Elder Marcus, destined Luna of the Shadowpine Pack. His lips curved in what might have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it. Though I'm guessing that last part recently became past tense. The casual way he said it, like my entire world falling apart was just another piece of pack gossip, sent a spike of anger through my chest.
Good.
Anger was better than despair. And you are Damon Cross, Beta of the Crescent Moon Pack. He paused, letting that sink in, and currently wondering why Marcus Nightshade's daughter is having a breakdown on my territory instead of celebrating her mating ceremony. Beta. That explained the power rolling off him in waves. Beta wolves were second only to alphas in strength and authority, but this one felt different. More dangerous. Mating ceremony. The words tasted like poison. Is that what they're calling it? Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of what might have been sympathy.
Ah.
Rejection, then. The simple acknowledgement of my pain, without judgment or false comfort, nearly undid me. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the mild October night. Public rejection, I corrected. In front of 300 pack members. For my best friend.
Ouch.
Damon's voice went soft. Blackthorn's an idiot. Everyone seems to think otherwise. The admission slipped out before I could stop it. Maybe I really am just not enough. Hey. His hand touched my chin, tilting my face up to meet his eyes. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, not painful like the rejection wound, but warm and oddly comforting. Look at me, Lyra. Those storm gray eyes were closer now, and I could see flecks of silver in them that seemed to catch the moonlight. You know what I see when I look at you? He asked quietly. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I see a woman whose power is so strong it's literally changing the temperature of the forest around us. I see someone who walked away from a rejection with her head held high instead of begging for scraps. I see a nightshade, and that bloodline has never produced weak wolves. As if summoned by his words, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying the scent of ozone and something wilder. Something that made both our wolves prick their ears in attention. Speaking of which, Damon continued, his hand dropping from my face, there are rumors about your family line. Old stories that most packs dismissed as legend. My pulse quickened. What kind of stories? The kind that say the first Nightshade wasn't just a tracker. His eyes never left mine. She was a moon witch. Someone who could bend the very forces of nature to her will. The wind picked up again, and this time I felt it respond to something inside me, a stirring in my blood that had nothing to do with my wolf, and everything to do with something much older. That's impossible, I whispered, but even as I said it, I remembered the way the temperature had dropped at my rejection. The way the pack had stepped back when my eyes blazed silver. Is it? Damon asked. Because right now, you're unconsciously pulling moisture from the air. In about 30 seconds, it's going to start raining in a perfect circle around us, while the rest of the forest stays dry. I looked up at the clear night sky, then back at him. You're lying. He shrugged. Give it 20 seconds. The first drops hit my face exactly 20 seconds later. I stared at him in shock as a gentle rain began to fall in a perfect circle around the clearing, while the forest beyond remained untouched by so much as a mist. What's happening to me? I whispered. Damon stepped closer, his presence somehow grounding me as the impossible rain continued to fall. You're awakening, Lyra. The trauma of rejection has cracked something open inside you, something your bloodline has been suppressing for generations. And if I can't control it? His expression turned grim. Then you'll need to learn.
Fast.
Because if the pack councils discover there's a moon witch bloodline still active. He trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. Witch bloodlines had been hunted to near extinction centuries ago. The old laws still stood. Any werewolf showing signs of elemental magic was to be eliminated on sight. They'll kill me, I breathed. Not if I can help it. The fierce certainty in his voice made me look at him sharply. The Crescent Moon Pack has always been different. We don't follow all the old laws. Our Alpha believes in adaptation, evolution. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Something flickered across his face. Pain, loss, understanding. "Because I know what it's like to be rejected for something beyond your control. And because—" He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Because every instinct I have is telling me you're important. Not just to you or your pack, but to all of us." The rain was coming harder now, and I could feel the power building inside me like pressure in a kettle. Wild, untamed, begging for release. "I can't make it stop," I gasped, panic rising in my chest. "Then don't." Damon moved behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders. "Let it out, Lyra. Let yourself feel everything. The betrayal, the anger, the power. Stop trying to be what they wanted you to be." Something inside me snapped, not breaking but opening, like a door that had been locked for 25 years finally swinging wide. The rain became a torrent, thunder crashed overhead, and I felt ancient magic sing through my veins like wildfire. This was what I was supposed to be. Not a pretty Luna who smiled and looked decorative on an alpha's arm, but something fierce and untamed and free. Lightning split the sky directly above us, and in that moment of blinding illumination, I saw the truth written in Damon's eyes. He wasn't just helping me out of kindness. He was afraid of me. The storm cut off as suddenly as it had begun, leaving us standing in perfect silence under a clear, star-filled sky. The only evidence of what had happened were the puddles at our feet and the scent of ozone in the air. "Well," Damon said quietly, his hands still steady on my shoulders. That was impressive. I turned to face him and saw my reflection in his eyes. Wild hair, glowing silver irises, and an expression I'd never worn before. Powerful, dangerous, beautiful. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now, Lyra Nightshade," he said, "we find out exactly what you're capable of. And we pray it's enough for what's coming." "What's coming?" His expression darkened.
War.
The pack councils have been whispering about supernatural threats for months. Something stirring in the old places, something that has them scared enough to consider desperate measures. "And they think I'm connected to it?" "I think," Damon said carefully, "that your awakening tonight wasn't a coincidence. I think whatever's coming has been waiting for you." As if summoned by his words, a howl echoed through the forest, but it wasn't the call of any wolf I'd ever heard. It was older, wilder, touched with magic that made my newly awakened power shiver in recognition. Something was calling to me from deep in the ancient places of the world. And against every rational thought in my head, I wanted to answer. Chapter 3. 3 days later, I found myself standing at the gates of the Crescent Moon Pack compound, a duffel bag containing everything I owned slung over my shoulder. The irony wasn't lost on me. 72 hours ago, I'd been destined to rule one of the most powerful packs in North America. Now I was a refugee, grateful for sanctuary among strangers. The Crescent Moon territory was nothing like Shadowpine's manicured perfection. Where Kieran's pack favored modern buildings and carefully maintained grounds, this place felt wild, organic. Cabins and larger structures seemed to grow from the forest itself, built around ancient trees instead of clearing them away. It felt like home in a way that surprised me. Second thoughts. Damon's voice came from behind me, warm with understanding rather than judgment. I turned to find him approaching with 2 steaming coffee mugs, his dark hair still mussed from sleep. 3 days of staying in his guest cabin had taught me that Beta Damon Cross was decidedly not a morning person, unless there was a crisis requiring his attention. Apparently, I qualified as a crisis. About the sanctuary?
No.
About the coffee? Definitely. I accepted the mug gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. "What did you put in this?" "Trade secret. Learned it from our pack's healer." He settled beside me on the porch steps, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "She insists it helps with magical hangovers." I groaned. "Is that what this is? I feel like I got hit by a truck driven by lightning." "Close. You channeled enough raw power 3 nights ago to light up a small city. Your body's still adjusting to the magical pathways opening up." The past 3 days had been a crash course in things I'd never imagined were real. Magical theory, elemental control exercises, and meditation techniques that were supposed to help me contain the storm brewing under my skin. So far, I'd managed to accidentally freeze Damon's shower, start 3 small fires, and summon enough wind to knock over a centuries-old oak tree. How is any of this possible? I asked, not for the first time. Werewolves and magic don't mix. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows a lot of things that aren't true. Damon's voice held a note I was beginning to recognize, the tone he used when he was deciding how much truth to share. The supernatural world is bigger and stranger than most packs want to acknowledge. The rumble of engines broke through the morning quiet, and I watched a convoy of black SUVs wind up the mountain road toward the compound. My stomach dropped. Expecting company? I asked, though something in Damon's suddenly tense posture told me this wasn't a social call. Stay behind me, he murmured, setting down his coffee and rising in one fluid motion. And whatever happens, don't let them see your eyes change color. The lead vehicle disgorged a woman who radiated authority from every pore. Tall, elegant, with silver-streaked black hair and the kind of bearing that screamed high-ranking pack official. Behind her came 2 men in expensive suits, council enforcement officers, if I had to guess. Beta Cross, the woman called out, her voice carrying easily across the compound. I'm Councilwoman Victoria Hawthorne. We're here on official pack council business. Councilwoman, to what do we owe the pleasure? Damon moved down the steps with predatory grace, placing himself squarely between me and the newcomers. We're investigating reports of unusual supernatural activity in this region. Her pale eyes swept over the compound, cataloging everything. Specifically, unauthorized magic use. My blood turned to ice. 3 days. It had taken them 3 days to track the magical storm I'd summoned. As you know, the supernatural accords strictly forbid werewolves from practicing elemental magic. Such activities are considered a direct threat to pack security and must be reported immediately. Of course, Damon replied smoothly. Though I'm not sure why you'd think to look here. The Crescent Moon Pack has always been fully compliant with council regulations. Councilwoman Hawthorne's smile was sharp as a blade. Perhaps. But we have reports of a powerful magical disturbance originating from this territory 3 nights ago. Storm patterns that meteorologists are calling impossible. Lightning strikes in a perfect circle, rain that fell in a 20-foot radius while the surrounding area remained completely dry. I fought to keep my breathing steady, to maintain the mental shields Damon had been teaching me. But I could feel power stirring under my skin, responding to my fear like a wild animal sensing danger. Fascinating, Damon said. Have you considered consulting with the local weather witches? I believe there's a coven. Don't. The word cracked like a whip, and Councilwoman Hawthorne's eyes went cold. We both know there are no registered magical practitioners in this region, which means someone is operating outside the law. She started walking toward the porch, her enforcement officers flanking her. Every step brought her closer to discovering me, closer to the truth that would mean my death under the old laws. Beta Cross, she continued, I'll need to interview every member of your pack, starting with any recent arrivals or refugees. The word refugees hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my control slip. Wind began to swirl around the porch, gentle at first, but growing stronger. Damon shot me a warning look over his shoulder. I'm afraid that won't be possible, he said. Alpha Thorne is currently off territory on pack business. Without his explicit permission. The Council's authority supersedes pack hierarchy in matters of supernatural law, Councilwoman Hawthorne interrupted. Now, if you would please gather your pack members. Thunder crashed overhead, despite the clear blue sky, and every person in the compound looked up in shock. I had approximately 30 seconds before my emotional state triggered something much worse than a little wind. Damon, I whispered urgently. He heard the desperation in my voice and made a decision that probably saved my life. Councilwoman, he said, stepping forward with the full weight of his beta authority. I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Now.
Her eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? You're on Crescent Moon territory without Alpha permission, making accusations without evidence, and causing distress to my pack members. His voice carried the kind of power that made lesser wolves submit automatically. That constitutes harassment under pack law. For a moment, the clearing was silent except for the wind that was definitely not natural and the distant rumble of thunder from a storm that shouldn't exist. Councilwoman Hawthorne's eyes narrowed, and I saw the exact moment she decided Damon was hiding something worth pursuing. Very well, Beta. But be assured, the council will be back. With proper documentation and Alpha Thorne's cooperation. She turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Beta? When we return, I'll expect to meet every single member of your pack. Especially the ones who think they can hide. They left as quickly as they'd arrived, but the threat hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. The moment the convoy disappeared around the bend, my legs gave out. I sank onto the porch steps, shaking so hard I nearly dropped my coffee mug. They know, I whispered. They know it was me. They suspect. Damon sat beside me, his presence steady and grounding. But suspicion isn't proof. And by the time they come back with official documentation, you'll be better at controlling your abilities. What if I'm not? What if I can't learn fast enough? Then we'll make sure you have other options. A new voice joined the conversation, and I looked up to see a woman approaching from the main compound. She was probably in her 40s, with auburn hair streaked with premature silver and eyes the color of forest moss. Power rolled off her in waves, but it felt different from the dominant authority of an Alpha or Beta. This was older, wilder. Lyra, Damon said, standing respectfully, meet Elena Ravencrest. Our pack's healer and magical consultant. And the person who's going to help you not accidentally level half the forest while you're learning, Elena added with a wry smile. Though I have to say, that storm 3 nights ago was impressive work for someone with no training. You're a witch, I breathed, recognizing the source of her different energy signature. Among other things. She settled on the steps beside me, uninvited but somehow welcome. And before you ask, yes, it's legal. The Crescent Moon Pack has special dispensation from the Council to employ magical consultants for territory protection. Could I get the same dispensation? Elena and Damon exchanged a look that made my stomach sink. It's complicated, Elena said carefully. The dispensation covers witches who work with packs, not wolves who develop magical abilities. The Council considers that a different category entirely. A more dangerous category, Damon added grimly. Because of the Moon Witch bloodlines? Because Moon Witches were never just witches, Elena corrected. They were werewolves who could channel celestial magic directly from the moon goddess herself. No rituals, no tools, no limits, just pure, raw power tied to their shifting abilities. And they were powerful enough to challenge Alpha authority directly. Some of them even formed their own packs, ruled by magical strength instead of physical dominance. She paused, studying my face. The pack councils destroyed them because they represented a fundamental threat to the established order. So, what am I supposed to do? The question came out sharper than I intended. Hide for the rest of my life? Pretend to be something I'm not. You're supposed to learn. Train. Get strong enough to protect yourself and the people you care about. Elena's eyes flicked meaningfully toward Damon. Because whether you like it or not, you're already involved in something bigger than personal survival. What do you mean? Damon ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking older than his 30-something years. There have been incidents. Across the territories. Supernatural creatures going missing, magical wards failing, ancient protective sites being vandalized. The councils think someone's trying to weaken the barriers between our world and the old places, Elena continued. Places where things were locked away for good reasons. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. You think my awakening is connected to this? I think, Damon said slowly, that your awakening might be the key to stopping it.
Or...
He hesitated. Or causing it, Elena finished bluntly. Moon Witch magic is tied to the ancient protective wards. If someone wanted to bring them down, they'd need someone with your bloodline to do it. They're not hunting me to eliminate a threat, I realized. They're hunting me to use me. The wind died completely, leaving the forest in eerie silence. In that stillness, I heard it again, the wild, haunting howl that had called to me 3 nights ago. But this time it was closer. Much closer. We need to go inside, Elena said quietly.
Now.
What is that? I whispered. Something that's been sleeping for 300 years, Damon replied grimly. Something your awakening might have just woken up. The howling came again, and this time it was answered by others. A pack that wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite human, and definitely wasn't anything the modern supernatural world was prepared to handle. Welcome to the real war, Lyra, Elena murmured as we hurried toward the safety of the compound. I hope you're ready to fight for more than just your own freedom. As we reached the door, I looked back once at the forest that surrounded the Crescent Moon territory. Somewhere in those shadows, ancient things were stirring. Things that knew my name, my power, and exactly what they wanted to do with both. The real fight was just beginning. Chapter 4. 2 weeks of training with Elena had taught me several important things about magic. First, that channeling elemental power while emotionally unstable was like trying to perform surgery with a chainsaw. Second, that meditation was apparently crucial for magical control, despite being mind-numbingly boring. And third, that my power was far stronger than anyone had initially realized. Focus on the water, not the outcome. Elena's voice drifted across the secluded clearing where we held our daily training sessions. You're trying to control instead of guide. I sat cross-legged beside the stream that ran through the heart of Crescent Moon territory, my hands hovering over the flowing water. The goal was simple: lift a single sphere of water without freezing it, boiling it, or accidentally summoning a flash flood. So far, I'd managed 2 out of 3. Taking a deep breath, I reached out with senses I was still learning to trust. The water responded immediately, rising in a perfect globe that reflected the afternoon sunlight like liquid crystal. For a moment, I felt the joy of pure creation, of power flowing through me as naturally as breathing. Then I thought about Kieran. The sphere froze solid and shattered, sending ice shards scattering across the clearing. Damn it, I muttered, brushing frozen fragments from my jeans. What triggered the emotional spike? Elena asked, settling beside me on the moss-covered log that served as our makeshift bench. Same thing as always. I picked up a piece of ice, watching it melt in my palm. I was doing fine until I started thinking about before. The rejection? The whole damn mess. Sometimes I wonder if I should just go back and apologize. Tell Kieran I understand why he chose Sarah, that I'm not angry. Lyra. Elena's voice cut through my spiral with sharp authority. Look at me. I met her moss-green eyes and saw something there that made me straighten. What you're describing isn't healing. It's self-destruction. You want to go back and minimize your own pain to make other people comfortable with their betrayal. The blunt assessment hit like a physical blow. You just want the pain to stop. I understand that. But going backward isn't the solution. She gestured toward the scattered ice. Your magic responds to your emotional truth. Every time you try to convince yourself you deserved what happened to you, your power rebels. Maybe my power is smarter than I am, I said, only half joking. Without question. The new voice made both Elena and me turn. Damon emerged from the tree line, his timing impeccable as always. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. What kind of situation? The kind where your father is currently sitting in our main hall, demanding to see you. I was on my feet before I consciously decided to move. Dad's here? How did he even? Apparently, the Pack Council's investigation has some people asking uncomfortable questions. Questions about where exactly Marcus Nightshade's daughter disappeared to after the rejection ceremony. This could be a trap, Elena warned. If the council suspects you're here, my father wouldn't betray me to the council. The words came out more confident than I felt. Would he? Damon's expression was carefully neutral. There's only one way to find out. But Lyra, if this goes bad, if he's here to take you back to face council justice, Then I'll handle it. I stood, brushing dirt from my jeans and trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. I'm not the same person who ran into these woods 2 weeks ago. It was true. The woman who'd fled Shadowpine territory had been broken, defeated, convinced of her own inadequacy. The person looking back at me from Elena's training sessions was someone else entirely, stronger, more self-assured, and definitely more dangerous. The walk to the main hall felt endless and far too short at the same time. My heart hammered against my ribs as we approached the large log building that served as the pack's central meeting place. "Remember," Elena murmured as we climbed the front steps, "your power reflects your emotional state. Stay grounded, stay present." The moment I stepped through the door, I saw him. Elder Marcus Nightshade sat in one of the chairs near the massive stone fireplace, looking older than I remembered. His graying hair was more silver than brown now, and new lines mapped the weathered landscape of his face. But his eyes, those same sharp green eyes I'd inherited, were exactly as I remembered. Assessing, calculating, missing nothing. "Lyra." He stood slowly, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "You look different." "I am different." I stayed near the door, Damon a reassuring presence at my side. "Hello, Dad." The silence stretched between us, like a chasm. This man had raised me, trained me, been both father and mentor for 25 years. He'd also stood silent while I was publicly humiliated and cast aside. "I was worried about you," he said finally. "When you disappeared that night, no one knew where you'd gone. Some feared you might have." He trailed off. "Might have what?" "Thrown myself off a cliff. Challenged Kieran to single combat." I crossed my arms, suddenly glad for the weeks of training that had taught me to center myself. "Or were you afraid I might do something that would embarrass the pack further?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair, Lyra." "Isn't it?" The words came out colder than I intended. "You stood there and watched him reject me. You told me to accept it with dignity while he paraded my best friend around like a prize. What was I supposed to do? Challenge an alpha's decision in front of the entire pack? You were supposed to be my father first and a pack elder second." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees, and I saw Damon tense in my peripheral vision. "You were supposed to care more about your daughter than pack politics." "I do care," Marcus said quietly. "That's why I'm here. Lyra, you need to come home." "This is my home now." The words surprised me with their certainty. "The council knows where you are. They've been asking questions, conducting interviews. It's only a matter of time before they come back with enforcement orders. Let them come. You don't understand the danger you're in." He stepped forward, and I caught a whiff of his familiar scent, pine needles and leather, and the particular musk that marked him as my father. "There are rumors, Lyra. Whispers about the magical disturbance that night. If they suspect you're careful." Damon's voice cut through the air like a blade. "These walls have ears, Elder Nightshade." My father's eyes flicked to Damon, really seeing him for the first time. I watched him catalog the Beta's protective stance, the way he'd positioned himself slightly between Marcus and me, the subtle but unmistakable territorial signals. "I see." Marcus's tone went flat. "And what exactly is your relationship with my daughter, Beta Cross?" "I'm someone who believes she deserves better than what Shadowpine offered her." "That's not what I asked." The air in the room grew thick with competing dominance displays. Two powerful men, each convinced they knew what was best for me, squaring off like rivals. And suddenly I was done. "Stop." The word carried enough force to make both men step back. "I'm not a prize to be fought over or a problem to be solved. I'm a grown woman making my own choices." The lights flickered, and I felt Elena's training kick in. Ground yourself. Find your center. Don't let emotions control the power. "Dad, I appreciate that you're worried, but I'm not coming back to Shadowpine. Not now, maybe not ever." "Lyra, please. Think about what you're giving up. Your heritage, your birthright." "My birthright?" I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "You mean my right to be publicly humiliated? My privilege of watching my mate choose someone else? There are other alphas, other packs. Your bloodline still carries weight." My bloodline carries more than weight, Dad. And we both know it. The words hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Marcus went very still, his face paling. What have you done? I've stopped pretending to be less than what I am. I stepped forward, letting him see the silver flecks that now permanently marked my green eyes. The question is, are you going to report that to your alpha? Or are you going to trust your daughter for once in her life? For a long moment, we stared at each other across the space that suddenly felt like an ocean. 25 years of shared history, love, disappointment, and now this impossible choice. The council can't know, he said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. If they discover what you are, they'll kill me. I know. I softened slightly, seeing the genuine fear in his eyes. That's why I can't come home, Dad. Not until I'm strong enough to protect myself. Marcus sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. How long do you think you have? I don't know. I glanced at Damon, drawing strength from his steady presence. But I have people helping me. Good people. And when the council comes, when they demand answers I can't give, you tell them the truth. That you came here looking for me and found nothing. That your daughter is lost to you, just like everyone else believes. Lyra. It's the only way, Dad. You know it is. He sat in silence for a long moment, staring into the fireplace where flames danced in patterns that seemed almost magical. Finally, he looked up at me with eyes that held a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Your mother would be proud of you, he said quietly. She always said the Nightshade women were too strong for their own good. She used to tell me stories about our ancestors, about women who could call lightning and speak to the moon. I paused, remembering. I thought they were just fairy tales. So, did I. He stood, straightening his shoulders, until I watched my daughter summon a storm out of clear skies. For a moment, the mask of Pack Elder fell away, and I saw just my father, proud, scared, and trying to do right by a daughter whose power he couldn't understand or protect. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Little Moon. The childhood nickname made my throat tight. Be careful. And if you need anything at all, you know how to reach me. He moved toward the door, then paused. Beta Cross. Sir, take care of her. Because if anything happens to my daughter under your protection, pact treaties won't save you from what I'll do. Understood, sir. But you should know, she doesn't need my protection. Anyone who threatens her is going to discover exactly what a moon witch is capable of. After my father left, the hall fell into heavy silence. I stood staring at the door, processing what had just happened. My father had chosen me over pack loyalty, over centuries of law and tradition. And I'd officially severed my last tie to my old life. How are you feeling? Elena asked softly. Free, I said, and was surprised to realize it was true. Terrified, but free. That's a good start, Damon said, moving to stand beside me. And for what it's worth, I think you handled that perfectly. I looked up at him, this man who'd taken me in when I had nowhere else to go, who'd helped me discover powers I never knew existed, who looked at me like I was something precious instead of something broken. Damon. Yeah, thank you. For all of it. Something shifted in his expression, and suddenly the air between us felt charged with a different kind of energy. Not the crackling power of my magic, but something warmer, more dangerous in its own way. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cut my cheek. Lyra. The moment shattered as shouting erupted from outside the hall. Damon dropped his hand and spun toward the windows, his body going into immediate alert mode. What the hell? Elena started. The howling started again, but this time it was close enough to rattle the windows. And it wasn't alone. Multiple voices joined the chorus, creating a harmony that made every supernatural instinct I possessed scream danger. They're here, I whispered, recognizing the calls that had been haunting my dreams. Whatever's been stalking us, they're here. Damon's voice commanding. Elena, ward the building. Now. Damon was already moving toward the weapons rack mounted near the fireplace. Lyra, I need you too. The front window exploded inward in a shower of glass and splinters. Through the opening came something that had once been a wolf, but was now twisted into something else entirely. Its eyes glowed with sickly yellow light. Its fur was matted with substances I didn't want to identify, and when it opened its mouth, I saw too many teeth. Corrupted, Elena shouted, magic already crackling around her hands. They've been touched by shadow magic. The creature's gaze fixed on me with unmistakable hunger, and I realized with cold certainty that this attack wasn't random. They'd come for me. Lyra, whatever you're going to do it now. Damon yelled as more creatures poured through the broken window. I felt power surge through my veins like liquid lightning, responding to the threat with an intensity that dwarfed anything I'd experienced in training. You want to see what a moon witch can do? I whispered, letting my eyes blaze silver white. Let me show you. Chapter 5. The world slowed to a crystalline moment of perfect clarity. I could see everything. The corrupted wolf crouched to spring, saliva dripping from its too many teeth, Elena's hands weaving protective wards that glowed like golden spider webs, Damon reaching for a silver blade that would never be fast enough. And I could feel everything. The ancient power that had been building in my bloodline for 3 generations, finally given permission to be free. I am Lyra Nightshade, I said, my voice carrying harmonics that made the windows vibrate. Daughter of the moon, granddaughter of storms, and you will not touch what is mine. Power erupted from me in a wave that knocked everyone, friend and foe alike, backward. The corrupted wolves hit the far wall with bone-crushing force, while Elena's wards absorbed the overflow, protecting her and Damon from the worst of it. But I was just getting started. I raised my left hand, and frost spread across the floor in intricate patterns, catching 3 of the creature's paws and freezing them in place. My right hand called lightning, not the wild, uncontrolled storm of my awakening, but precise bolts that struck with surgical accuracy. Holy shit! I heard Damon breathe, but he sounded more awed than afraid. The largest of the corrupted beasts broke free from the ice, its corrupted strength shattering my freezing spell like glass. It launched itself at me with impossible speed, claws extended, jaws wide enough to take my head off. I didn't move. Instead, I wrapped myself in wind and moonlight, creating a barrier that turned the creature's attack into a collision with what felt like a mountain. It bounced off, dazed, and I had a moment to really look at what we were fighting. These aren't just corrupted, I gasped, recognizing something in the twisted features. They're pack wolves. Someone did this to them deliberately. Shadow magic, Elena confirmed, her own power flaring as she bound 2 more creatures with chains of pure light. This level of corruption, it would take a master-level practitioner. Someone with access to forbidden knowledge. Someone who knew exactly when to attack, Damon added, his blade finding its mark in the shoulder of a wolf that had been trying to flank us. They waited until we were distracted, until Lyra was emotionally compromised. The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't random. Someone had been watching us, studying us, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. More howling echoed from the forest around the compound, and my heart sank. This wasn't just an attack, it was a coordinated assault. How many? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Lena's eyes went white as she extended her magical senses. 24. Maybe more. They've surrounded the entire compound. The pack scattered for evening hunt, Damon said grimly. It's just us and maybe 5 others who stayed behind. Then we make ourselves enough, I said, feeling power surge through me like a river breaking through a dam. Elena, can you ward the other buildings? Keep the pack members safe. For a while. But Lyra. I know. I looked at Damon, seeing my own grim determination reflected in his storm-gray eyes. We can't let them escape. If they report back to whoever sent them, as if summoned by my words, the coordinated attack began in earnest. Windows shattered throughout the compound as corrupted wolves poured through every opening. The air filled with the sounds of battle, snarling, shouting, the clash of claws against weapons. Stay close to me, I told Damon. I'm going to try something I've never done before. What exactly? I closed my eyes, reaching deep into the well of power that seemed to have no bottom. I'm going to ask the moon for help. Above us, though it was barely past sunset, the moon began to glow brighter. Not just the usual silver light, but something deeper, older, touched with the kind of magic that had shaped the world when it was young. Grandmother Moon, I whispered, using words that came from some ancestral memory I didn't know I possessed. Your daughter calls for aid. Let your light be my weapon, your wisdom be my shield. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Moonlight poured through the broken windows like liquid silver, and everywhere it touched, the corrupted wolves recoiled with howls of pain. But more than that, I could feel the moon's ancient presence, vast and loving and fiercely protective. You are my child, a voice whispered through my mind, warm as a mother's embrace and terrible as a hurricane. Show them what happens to those who threaten my chosen ones. I opened my eyes, and they blazed with silver fire that cast shadows in broad daylight. Elena, drop your wards and get behind me, I commanded. Damon, when I say run, you take her and get as far from me as possible. Lyra, what are you? I'm going to call down the moon. That's impossible. No one has that kind of power. I smiled, and felt the moon smile with me. No one except a moon witch whose bloodline goes back to the first wolves who ever howled at the night sky. The power building inside me was beyond anything I'd ever imagined. It felt like holding a star in my chest, like being connected to every beam of moonlight that had ever touched the earth. It was beautiful and terrifying and absolutely lethal. Run! Damon and Elena fled toward the back of the building just as I let the power loose. What happened next defied every law of physics I'd ever learned. Moonlight became solid, pouring down from the sky in pillars of silver fire that struck the corrupted wolves with the force of meteors. Where the light touched them, they didn't just die. They were cleansed, their corruption burned away until only peaceful pack wolves remained, unconscious but alive. The attack lasted maybe 30 seconds. When it was over, the compound was bathed in gentle silver light, and every corrupted creature within a half-mile radius had been either cleansed or destroyed. I stood in the center of it all, completely unharmed but utterly drained. Well, I said, swaying on my feet. That was new. Damon reached me first, his arms going around me just as my knees gave out. Lyra, are you hurt? Just tired, I mumbled against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent of pine and leather and something uniquely him. Using that much power is like running a marathon while juggling lightning. I've never seen anything like that, Elena breathed, approaching us with a kind of reverence usually reserved for holy sites. You didn't just channel the moon's power, you communed with it directly. That's the stuff of legends, Lyra. I straightened in Damon's arms, though I didn't step away from his warmth. I had help. The moon goddess herself. I trailed off, not sure how to explain what I'd experienced. What did she tell you? That I'm her chosen one. That this power isn't just mine, it belongs to something bigger. I looked around at the peaceful scene, at the unconscious pack wolves who would wake up confused but alive. And that whoever sent these creatures made a very big mistake. The sound of voices and running feet announced the return of the pack members who'd been out on evening patrol. Within minutes, we were surrounded by concerned faces and urgent questions. What happened here? Are you all right? What's that silver light? Everyone's safe, Damon assured them, his beta authority calming the crowd. We were attacked by corrupted wolves, but the threat's been neutralized. Corrupted? But that's... A young pack member, someone I'd met in passing, stared at the unconscious wolves scattered around the compound. How are they still alive? They were cleansed rather than destroyed, Elena explained carefully. We'll need to monitor them for lingering effects, but they should recover fully. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. These people had given me sanctuary when I had nowhere else to go. They deserved the truth, or at least part of it. The attack was aimed at me specifically, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silver-touched air. Someone out there knows what I am and wants to either capture or control me. That puts all of you at risk. Murmurs of concern rippled through the gathered pack members, but no one looked afraid. If anything, they looked protective. "Then we fight," said an older woman I recognized as one of the pack's senior hunters. "Your crescent moon now, Lyra. We protect our own." A chorus of agreement rose from the assembled wolves, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not magic this time, but something just as powerful, the recognition of true belonging. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with gratitude. "All of you. But I need you to understand, this is just the beginning. Whoever did this won't stop until they get what they want." "Then we'll be ready for them," Damon said, his hand finding mine and squeezing gently. "All of us. Together." As if his words had been a challenge, the wind shifted, carrying a scent that made every wolf in the compound freeze. "Do you smell that?" I whispered. "Shadowpine," Elena confirmed. "And council enforcement." "How many?" The rumble of engines answered his question. Multiple vehicles, approaching fast from the main road. Too many for a social visit, too organized for a rescue mission. "They're not here about the attack," I realized with growing horror. "They're here because of what I just did. Someone was watching, someone saw me call down the moon." "The magical signature from that much power," Elena said urgently. "It would have been visible to anyone with supernatural senses within 50 miles. If there were council observers in the area, then they know exactly what I am." I looked around at the pack members who'd just sworn to protect me, at Elena, who'd become like a sister, at Damon, whose presence had become essential to my sense of home. And they're coming to finish what the corrupted wolves started. The convoy was close enough now that we could hear individual engines, could distinguish between the heavy rumble of enforcement vehicles and the lighter sounds of pack cars. Mixed convoy, council and Shadowpine working together. "Get inside," I order the pack members. "Ward the buildings, protect the young ones. This isn't your fight." "Like hell it isn't," the senior hunter said firmly. "You called down the moon to protect us. Now it's our turn." "She's right," Damon said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely happy about it. "This is pack business now. We stand together, or we fall together." The convoy arrived in a cloud of dust and official authority. Black SUVs with council insignia mixed with the familiar deep green vehicles of the Shadowpine pack. And stepping out of the lead car, "Kieran," I breathed. Alpha Kieran Blackthorn approached with all the arrogant confidence I remembered, flanked by council enforcers and looking like he owned the world. But when his eyes met mine across the compound, I saw something that stopped my heart.
Fear.
"Lyra Nightshade," he called out, his alpha voice carrying the kind of compulsion that was designed to make lesser wolves submit. "By order of the Pack Council, you're under arrest for unauthorized magical practice and conspiracy against Pack security." I felt his attempted compulsion wash over me like water off a duck's back. Whatever I'd become when I'd communed with the moon goddess, it was beyond the reach of alpha dominance. "Hello, Kieran," I said calmly. "Nice to see you too. How's married life?" His jaw tightened at the casual dismissal of his authority, and I could see the exact moment he realized that the broken, desperate woman he'd rejected was gone forever. In her place stood something far more dangerous. "Now," I continued, letting just a hint of silver creep into my eyes, "what exactly did you want to discuss?" Chapter 6. The silence stretched between us like a blade balanced on its edge. Kieran stood 20 feet away, surrounded by council enforcers and looking every inch the powerful alpha he'd always been. But something was different. The easy confidence I remembered was cracked around the edges, and his dark eyes kept darting to the silver light that still clung to my skin like starshine. "You know," I said conversationally, "I'm getting really tired of uninvited guests showing up at my home." "This isn't your home, Lyra. You're a rogue wolf harboring illegal magical abilities. The council has jurisdiction." "Actually," Damon interrupted smoothly, stepping forward with his beta authority on full display, "she's a registered member of the Crescent Moon Pack, under the protection of Alpha Thorn. Your jurisdiction ended when she crossed our territory lines." One of the council enforcers, a tall, severe-looking woman with prematurely white hair, stepped forward. Beta Cross, I'm Commander Sarah Vex, head of Supernatural Enforcement. We have credible reports of Class 5 magical disturbances originating from this location. That supersedes Pack territorial claims. Commander, Elena said, moving to stand beside me. I'm Elena Ravencrest, licensed magical consultant for the Crescent Moon Pack. Any magical disturbances you detected were the result of defensive measures taken against an unprovoked attack by corrupted creatures. Corrupted creatures that are now mysteriously uncorrupted? Commander Vex's pale eyes swept over the unconscious wolves scattered around the compound. That level of cleansing magic requires power that hasn't been seen in over 3 centuries. Maybe your records are incomplete, I suggested, letting just enough edge creep into my tone to make it clear I wasn't intimidated. Maybe there are things about the old bloodlines that the council never bothered to understand. Lyra, please. Kieran's voice cracked slightly, and for a moment I heard an echo of the man I'd thought I loved. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Come with us willingly, answer their questions, and I promise you'll be treated fairly. I laughed, and the sound held no warmth at all. Your promises don't mean much to me anymore, Kieran. Remember? You already broke the biggest one you ever made. Behind me, I heard the subtle shift of pack members moving into defensive positions. Not threatening, not yet, but making it clear that I wasn't alone. She's not going anywhere, Damon said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet menace that made smart people reconsider their life choices. Lyra is under pack protection, and that protection extends to defending her from unlawful detention. Beta Cross, I strongly advise you not to interfere with council business. The consequences, I interrupted, feeling ancient power stir in response to the implied threat, depend entirely on whose laws we're following. And last I checked, the moon goddess outranks your council. The wind began to pick up around us, responding to my emotional state. Not the wild, uncontrolled storm of my early awakening, but something directed, purposeful. A reminder of exactly what kind of power they were threatening. Lyra, you're scaring them. And when the council gets scared, they make stupid decisions? I finished. Like sending my ex-mate to arrest me? Like attacking a sovereign pack's territory? Like threatening a moon witch under the protection of the goddess herself? I stepped forward, and every person in that compound, council enforcer and pack member alike, felt the weight of supernatural authority that had nothing to do with alpha dominance and everything to do with ancient magic. Let me make something crystal clear, I continued, my voice carrying harmonics that made the air shimmer. I am not the broken, desperate woman you rejected 6 weeks ago. I am not some rogue wolf hiding in the shadows. I am Lyra Nightshade, Moon Witch of the Crescent Moon Pack, chosen daughter of the goddess herself. Silver light began to dance around my hands, and I saw several of the enforcers reach for weapons they couldn't possibly hope to use against me. And if you think you can take me by force, I said softly, you're welcome to try. Commander Vex held up a hand, stopping her people from drawing weapons. Smart woman, she could obviously sense the kind of power radiating off me, and knew that a fight would end badly for everyone. Miss Nightshade, she said carefully, we're not here to arrest you. We're here to talk. Funny way of starting a conversation. Usually people begin with hello, not you're under arrest. The council has concerns, Kieran said, trying to regain control of the situation. Legitimate concerns about the level of power you displayed tonight. Power like that saved innocent lives. Damon cut in sharply. Those corrupted wolves were once pack members. Lyra could have destroyed them, but instead she found a way to cleanse them. That sounds like exactly the kind of power the world needs more of. The council disagrees, Commander Vex said bluntly. Power without oversight, without control, without accountability. That's how we ended up with the supernatural wars 3 centuries ago. Understanding crashed over me like a cold wave. You're not here because you think I'm dangerous. You're here because you're afraid I might inspire others. A moon witch who can commune directly with a goddess, Elena said quietly. who can cleanse corruption instead of just destroying it, who belongs to a pack instead of standing alone, who proves that the old ways of power weren't wrong, just inconvenient for people who wanted to control them. I finished. You're not afraid of what I might do. You're afraid of what I represent. Commander Vex's expression shifted, and for a moment I saw something almost like respect in her pale eyes. You're very perceptive, Miss Nightshade. Yes, that's exactly what we're afraid of. What are you talking about? Kieran looked genuinely confused. Lyra, what's she saying? I turned to face my former mate, this man who'd once been the center of my world, and now felt like a stranger. She's saying that the Council's version of supernatural law, the one that says magical abilities must be registered, controlled, limited, isn't about safety. It's about power. The Moon Witches weren't destroyed because they were dangerous, Kieran. They were destroyed because they couldn't be controlled, because they answered to a higher authority than pack councils and enforcement agencies. I saw understanding dawn on several faces. Pack members who'd grown up with sanitized versions of supernatural history, enforcers who'd never questioned the party line. And now one has awakened again, Commander Vex said quietly, with power that rivals the ancient bloodlines and a pack willing to stand with her. Do you understand why that makes certain people nervous? I understand that certain people are about to discover what happens when they threaten pack members, Damon said, his own authority flaring in response to the implied threat. The rumble of more engines interrupted the standoff, and my heart sank as another convoy of vehicles wound up the mountain road. More council reinforcements? Shadowpine backup? Expecting more company? I asked Commander Vex. Her frown suggested she wasn't. Those aren't our vehicles. The new arrivals were driving larger vehicles, pickup trucks and SUVs that looked built for serious off-road work rather than official transport. And when the doors opened,
Dad.
Elder Marcus Nightshade stepped out of the lead truck, followed by a dozen other familiar faces. Pack elders, senior hunters, even some of the younger warriors I'd grown up with. All Shadowpine pack, all looking grim and determined. Marcus. Kieran's voice carried genuine shock. What are you doing here? Protecting my daughter, my father said simply. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. Elder Nightshade, you're out of line. I'm your alpha. You're the man who rejected my daughter in front of 300 witnesses. Marcus cut him off, his own authority as a pack elder blazing like cold fire. You forfeited the right to my unquestioning loyalty that night. I stared at the dozen Shadowpine wolves who just declared themselves willing to defy their alpha for me. These weren't just pack members, they were friends, family, people who'd watched me grow up. You came, I whispered. Of course we came, Little Moon. The voice belonged to Hannah Riverside, the pack's head healer and the woman who'd helped deliver me 25 years ago. Did you think we'd abandoned you? I thought you all agreed with the rejection. Some of us were too shocked to react properly that night, my father said, shame coloring his tone. Others were too concerned with pack politics to remember what really mattered. But when word came that the council was moving against you, we remembered that you're Nightshade, Hannah finished. And Nightshades don't abandon family. This is highly irregular, Commander Vex said, though she sounded more frustrated than angry. Elder Nightshade, your presence here complicates an already delicate situation. Commander, with respect, my daughter is not a criminal. She's a young woman who was driven from her home by a traumatic rejection and discovered abilities she never knew she possessed. If the Council has concerns about her power, perhaps those concerns should be addressed through dialogue rather than enforcement action. I looked around the compound, taking in the impossible scene. 2 packs worth of wolves, Council enforcers, my ex-mate who'd rejected me, and my father who defied his alpha to support me. All gathered in the silver-touched aftermath of the most powerful magic I'd ever channeled. You know what? I said, stepping into the center of the group, where everyone could see and hear me clearly. Everyone wants to talk. Fine, let's talk. Commander Vex, you're concerned about uncontrolled magical power. I understand that. The last time someone with my abilities ran unchecked, it apparently caused a war. Kieran, you're worried about pack stability and council relations. Dad, You're trying to protect me while maintaining your position in Shadowpine. Damon, you're ready to go to war to keep me safe. But here's what I think we're all missing. The world is changing whether the council likes it or not. Those corrupted creatures tonight? They're not the end of something. They're the beginning. Someone or something is actively working to destabilize the supernatural world, and they're powerful enough to turn pack wolves into monsters. As if summoned by my words, the wind shifted again, carrying sounds that made every supernatural creature present tense with alarm. Distant howling, but not from any wolf throat. Something else. Something that didn't belong in the natural world. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, feeling ancient power sing through my voice. The council is going to stop treating me like a threat and start treating me like an ally. Because like it or not, you need someone who can cleanse corruption instead of just fighting it. And if we refuse? Commander Vex asked. I smiled and let my eyes blaze with silver fire that reflected the full power of my connection to the moon goddess. Then you're going to face whatever's coming without the one person who might actually be able to stop it. The howling came again, closer this time, and I felt something inside me respond with recognition that chilled my blood. They're coming back, I whispered. And this time, they're bringing friends. What's coming back? Kieran demanded. The real enemy, I said, watching the tree line with growing dread. The ones who turned those pack wolves into monsters. The ones who've been waiting for me to reveal myself. The ones who want to finish what the Moon Witch Hunters started 300 years ago. Chapter 7. What followed was the most surreal 10 minutes of my life. Council enforcers worked alongside pack wolves to establish defensive positions. Kieran found himself taking tactical advice from Damon, the man protecting his rejected mate. My father coordinated with Elena to set up magical barriers, while Hannah Riverside distributed silver ammunition to anyone who could handle a weapon. And through it all, the howling grew closer. Not just the twisted calls of corrupted wolves, but something else. Something that made my newly awakened magical senses recoil in horror. That's not corruption, Elena said, her face pale as she monitored the approaching threat with her magical senses. That's something much worse. That's absence. Explain, Commander Vex ordered, her official demeanor cracking under the pressure of facing an unknown enemy. Corruption twists what's already there, turns good wolves into monsters.
But this.
Elena's hands trembled as she maintained her sensing spell. This is like someone took pieces of the world and cut them out entirely, left holes where life should be. Void creatures, I breathed, the knowledge coming from some ancestral memory I hadn't known I possessed. Someone summoning creatures from the spaces between worlds. I know that term, my father said quietly. My grandmother used to tell stories, warnings about what happened when the barriers between worlds grew thin. Stories later, tactics now, Damon said, checking the clip in his silver-loaded pistol. How do we fight something that's made of nothing? I closed my eyes, reaching deep into the well of inherited knowledge that seemed to expand every time I needed it. Images flashed through my mind, ancient battles, moon witches standing against horrors that shouldn't exist, power techniques that had been lost for centuries. Light, I said suddenly. Pure light, blessed by the moon goddess. It's the only thing that can destroy void creatures completely. And how exactly do we generate holy moonlight on demand?
Kieran asked.
I opened my eyes and looked around at the assembled wolves, 2 packs, council enforcers, and a witch, all united against a common threat that could destroy everything we cared about. We don't, I said. I do. Lyra, no, Damon said immediately. You nearly collapsed after calling down the moon earlier. Channeling that much power again could kill you. He's right, Elena added. Your magical pathways are still developing. Pushing too hard, too fast. Could save everyone here, I finished. Look, I appreciate the concern, but we don't have a choice. Those things are minutes away from reaching us, and conventional weapons won't even slow them down. As if to emphasize my point, the temperature around us dropped 20 degrees in the span of seconds. Not natural cold, the kind of chill that came from being near something that actively consumed warmth, light, and life itself. "What do you need us to do?" Hannah asked, stepping forward with the kind of calm authority that had made her the pack's head healer for 30 years. "Form a circle around me. Physical contact if you can manage it. I need to anchor the power through living connections, or it'll tear me apart." "You want us to trust our lives to untested magic?" Commander Vex asked. "You want to test your silver bullets against creatures made of hungry darkness?" I shot back. Because from where I'm standing, untested magic beats certain death. Person in the compound understood exactly the first void creature stepped into the edge of our light, and every why conventional weapons wouldn't work. It looked like a wolf-shaped hole in reality. Not black, black was still something. This was an absence so complete it hurt to look at directly. Where it stepped, the grass didn't just die, it ceased to have ever existed. "Holy shit," someone whispered. "Mother of wolves," my father breathed. "Circle. Now," I ordered, extending my hands toward the nearest people, Damon on one side, Elena on the other. Without hesitation, they formed up around me. Damon and Elena beside me, then my father, Hannah, several Shadowpine wolves I'd known since childhood, Crescent Moon Pack members who'd accepted me as family, and even Commander Vex and 2 of her enforcers. At the last second, Kieran stepped into the circle. "Kieran, I may have been an idiot about us," he said quietly, "but I was never stupid enough to let you face something like this alone." The moment the circle closed, I felt it. The combined strength of 20-plus supernatural beings flowing through our joined hands. Not just their power, but their hopes, their fears, their determination to protect what mattered. "Grandmother Moon," I called, my voice carrying across dimensions. "Your children stand together against the darkness. Let your light be our weapon, your love be our shield." The response was immediate and overwhelming. But this time, instead of channeling the moon's power alone, I felt it flow through me into the circle, then back again, amplified by every person connected to the magical link. Light erupted from our joined hands, not the silver moonlight of my earlier display, but something purer, older, touched with the combined will of every person in the circle. It poured outward in waves that made the void creatures recoil with sounds like reality tearing. The nearest void creature let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite the absence of sound. Where the blessed light touched it, pieces of nothingness began to fill in with actual existence, grass, air, the potential for life. "More coming," Elena gasped, her magical senses tracking additional threats. "Dozens of them." I pushed harder, drawing not just on the moon's power but on the combined strength of everyone in the circle. Through our connection, I could feel their individual contributions, Damon's steady strength, Elena's magical knowledge, my father's decades of experience, Hannah's healing wisdom, even Kieran's alpha authority and Commander Vex's tactical precision. The light expanded outward like a star being born, sweeping across the compound and into the forest beyond. Everywhere it touched, void creatures were either destroyed outright or filled in with the reality they'd been stealing from the world. Within minutes, the attack was over. The creatures that hadn't been destroyed fled back into whatever dark spaces they'd crawled out of, unable to withstand the combined force of divine light and unified will. When the last of the light faded, I found myself supported by Damon's strong arms, surrounded by equally exhausted but triumphant allies. "Did we?" I started. "We destroyed them," Elena confirmed, her own voice filled with wonder. "All of them. And the ones that escaped, they won't be able to return to this area. The blessed light has sanctified the entire territory." Commander Vex stepped forward, and when she spoke, her tone held a respect that hadn't been there before. "Miss Nightshade, I owe you an apology. What I witnessed tonight, that wasn't dangerous, uncontrolled magic. That was divine intervention channeled through someone the goddess herself has chosen. It wasn't just me," I said, looking around the circle of people who'd just risked everything to stand with me. "It was all of us. Together." "Lyra," Kieran said quietly, "I need to say something." I tensed, not sure I was ready for whatever he wanted to discuss. What I did to you, the rejection, the public humiliation, there's no excuse for it. You were my mate, my partner, and I threw you away because I was scared of how powerful you were becoming. Scared? Terrified, he admitted. You were growing into something magnificent, something that would have overshadowed me completely. And instead of celebrating that, instead of being proud to stand beside you, I chose someone who would make me feel more important. I stared at him, processing this admission. The woman I'd been 6 weeks ago would have been desperate to hear these words, would have seen them as validation of her worth. The woman I was now felt nothing, or rather, felt sad for him. Thank you for saying that, I said honestly. But Kieran, it doesn't change anything. What we had is over. Not because I'm angry, though I was, but because I've become someone who needs a partner, not someone who needs to be the smaller person to make their mate feel bigger. I felt Damon's hand squeeze mine gently, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone in this new life I'd built. I know, Kieran said. And for what it's worth, I think Damon's a lucky man. You've become everything I was too weak to handle. She's become everything her mother always said she would, my father added, pride thick in his voice. A moon witch worthy of the ancient bloodlines. I looked around at the assembled group, former enemies now allies, old wounds beginning to heal, and a new sense of purpose forming. So, what happens now? I asked. Those void creatures didn't just appear randomly. Someone summoned them, someone with serious magical power and a grudge against moon witches. Someone who knows you've awakened and wants to stop you before you reach your full potential, Elena agreed. The council will want a full report, Commander Vex said. But I'll be recommending that instead of trying to contain you, we offer you official support. The supernatural world needs protectors like you. And I'll accept that support, I said. But on one condition. Which is? We do this as partners, not as controller and controlled. The days of moon witches being hunted or caged are over. If you want my help protecting the supernatural world, then you treat me as an equal. Murmurs of agreement rose from the assembled wolves, and I saw Commander Vex nod slowly. Agreed. Partners. The sound of approaching vehicles made everyone tense again, but these were different. Lighter, moving slowly rather than racing toward us. That'll be Alpha Thorn, Damon said, relief clear in his voice. I sent word when the attack started. A single SUV pulled up, and out stepped a man who radiated calm authority like a physical force. Alpha Marcus Thorn was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with silver-streaked brown hair and eyes the color of forest shadows. Beta Cross, he said, surveying the damage and the unlikely gathering of packs and council enforcers. I see you've been busy. Alpha, we were attacked by void creatures. Lyra channeled divine light to destroy them, working in cooperation with volunteers from both packs and the council enforcement team. Alpha Thorn's gaze settled on me, and I felt the weight of assessment from someone powerful enough to lead one of the most progressive packs in North America. Miss Nightshade, he said formally, I believe it's time we had a proper conversation about your future with the Crescent Moon Pack. I'd like that, Alpha. But first, I think we need to talk about what's coming next. Because whoever sent those creatures isn't going to stop just because we defeated one attack. Agreed. Commander Vex, I assume the council will want to establish a joint task force. That's exactly what I was thinking, Alpha. With Miss Nightshade as our supernatural specialist and liaison to the divine powers. I looked around at the faces surrounding me. Pack members who'd become family, former enemies who'd become allies, and new responsibilities that felt both terrifying and exactly right. Then let's get started, I said. Because something tells me we're going to need all the help we can get. As if summoned by my words, the wind shifted one last time, carrying a scent that made every supernatural nose in the compound wrinkle with distaste. What is that? Someone asked. I closed my eyes, extending my magical senses toward the source of the smell, and felt my blood run cold. That, I said quietly, is the scent of whoever's been hunting moon witches for 3 centuries. And they know exactly where to find me. Chapter 8. Dawn came too soon and not soon enough. After the night's revelations and battles, Alpha Thorn had insisted everyone get some rest before tackling the larger implications of what we'd discovered. But sleep had been elusive, filled with dreams of void creatures and the growing certainty that something much worse was coming. I sat on the porch of Damon's cabin, wrapped in his jacket and nursing my third cup of Elena's magical coffee blend, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. Beside me, Damon scrolled through reports on his tablet, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "It's not just us," he said quietly. "I've got reports from packs across 3 states. Void creature attacks, corrupted wolves, magical wards failing. All within the last month. All since my awakening," I realized with growing dread. Someone's been tracking my magical development, timing their attacks to coincide with my growing power. Elena emerged from the main compound, her usual calm demeanor cracked with exhaustion and worry. "Lyra, we need to talk. I've been analyzing the residual magical signatures from last night's attack." "What did you find?" "The summoning magic that called those void creatures. I recognize it. It's based on techniques that were supposed to have been destroyed with the last of the Moon Witch hunters 3 centuries ago." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You're saying whoever's doing this has access to ancient hunter magic?" "I'm saying whoever's doing this might actually be one of the ancient hunters. Or their direct descendant with access to their knowledge and power." Before I could fully process that terrifying possibility, the sound of approaching vehicles announced the arrival of our hastily assembled task force. Alpha Thorn's SUV led the convoy, followed by Commander Vex's council vehicles and a truck I didn't recognize. "Good morning," Alpha Thorn said as he approached our little group. "I hope everyone managed some rest, because we have a lot to discuss." "Define rest," I said, accepting the hand Damon offered to help me to my feet. "Because if you mean lying awake wondering what ancient evil wants to kill me, then yes, I got lots of rest." "I see you've inherited the Nightshade tendency toward gallows humor," he said with a slight smile. "Your grandmother was the same way." "You knew my grandmother?" "I knew all the Moon Witches, Lyra. I'm older than I look." Commander Vex approached with several people I didn't recognize, council researchers, by the look of their equipment and serious expressions. Behind them came my father and the other Shadowpine wolves who'd stayed overnight. "Miss Nightshade, Alpha Thorn," Commander Vex said formally. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Sarah Chin, our head of supernatural historical research, and Marcus Webb, our expert on extinct magical bloodlines." Dr. Chin stepped forward, a woman in her 50s with prematurely gray hair and eyes that sparkled with intellectual curiosity. "Miss Nightshade, it's an honor. I've spent most of my career studying accounts of Moon Witch abilities. To actually meet one is probably not as exciting as your research suggested," I said diplomatically. "Most of the time, I'm just trying not to accidentally freeze things or summon storms." Marcus Webb, a lean man with sharp features and calculating eyes, stepped forward. "Miss Nightshade, I need to ask you some questions about your awakening. Specifically, whether you've experienced any contact from entities claiming to be your ancestors." Something in his tone made me wary. "Why?" "Because one of the techniques the Moon Witch hunters used was impersonation. They would pose as spirits of dead witches, offering power and knowledge to newly awakened bloodlines. Once they gained trust, they could manipulate the new witch into destructive actions that would justify hunter retaliation." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You think the moon goddess who spoke to me might have been—" "No," Elena said firmly. "I was monitoring your magical signature during the Divine Communion. What you connected with was definitely genuine divine power, not some hunter trick." "But Mr. Webb raises an important point," Dr. Chen added. "The hunters were masters of psychological manipulation. They didn't just hunt moon witches. They studied them, learned their weaknesses, developed techniques to turn their own power against them." Alpha Thorn's phone buzzed with an incoming call, and his expression darkened as he answered it. "What? When? How many casualties?" A pause. "We'll be there in an hour." "What's wrong?" I asked. The Riverside Pack, about 50 miles north of here. They were attacked an hour ago. Void creatures and corrupted wolves, just like last night. But this time... He paused, his jaw tight. This time, there were no survivors to cleanse. Only bodies. The assembled group fell into horrified silence. An entire pack wiped out. It's escalating, I said quietly. Last night was a test run. They wanted to see how I'd respond, what kind of power I could bring to bear. And now they know, Commander Vex said grimly. They know you can channel divine power, that you work with allies, that you can cleanse corruption. Which means they'll adapt their strategy. I finished, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders like a lead blanket. They'll come up with something I can't cleanse, can't fight with divine light. The historical records mention something called a final hunt, Marcus Webb said quietly. A technique the hunters developed as a last resort when facing particularly powerful moon witches. What kind of technique? They would corrupt the witch's own power source. Instead of attacking from outside, they'd find a way to poison the connection between the witch and the moon goddess herself. Turn divine power into something destructive. That's not possible, Elena breathed. You can't corrupt divine magic. It's antithetical to its very nature. Unless, Dr. Chin said slowly, you had access to power that was equally divine but opposed to the moon goddess. Power from something that used to be divine but fell from grace. Understanding crashed over me like an avalanche. You're talking about fallen divine beings. Angels that were cast out, gods that were stripped of their power. The hunters weren't just humans with magical knowledge, Alpha Thorn said quietly. They were backed by something that had a personal grudge against the divine powers that created the moon witches. As if summoned by our discussion, the wind began to pick up around the compound. But this wasn't the natural mountain breeze we'd grown accustomed to. This carried a scent that made every supernatural nose wrinkle with instinctive revulsion. They're here, I whispered, the certainty hitting me like ice water. They've been listening. The forest around us fell into unnatural silence. No birds, no insects, no small animals rustling through the underbrush. Even the wind died, leaving an oppressive stillness that made my skin crawl. Very good, little witch. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, carrying harmonics that hurt to hear. You're learning faster than most of your predecessors. Weapons appeared in hands, magical defenses flared to life, and everyone moved into defensive positions around me. But somehow I knew it wouldn't matter. Oh, please, the voice continued with amusement that felt like broken glass. Put away your toys. If I wanted you all dead, you'd already be corpses. What do you want? I called out, trying to project more confidence than I felt. Footsteps approached through the trees, but I couldn't see anyone walking. Then, slowly, a figure began to materialize from the shadows, not stepping out of hiding, but literally forming from darkness itself. He was tall, elegant, and would have been handsome if not for the complete absence of warmth in his pale blue eyes. Dark hair, aristocratic features, and clothing that looked like it had stepped out of a historical drama. But it was the power radiating from him that made my newly awakened magical senses scream warnings. This wasn't just a powerful supernatural being. This was something that had once been divine, and now carried the bitter cold of eternal exile. Allow me to introduce myself, he said with a bow that somehow managed to be both elegant and mocking. I am Azrael Shadowborn, last of the Celestial Hunters. And I am here to offer you a choice, Miss Nightshade. What kind of choice? Join me willingly, and I'll make your death quick. Fight me, and I'll kill everyone you care about first, then corrupt your power so thoroughly that you'll spend eternity as my weapon against the divine forces that created you. Option 3, I said, feeling ancient power stir in response to the threat. I tear you apart and scatter the pieces across dimensions so you can never threaten anyone again. He laughed, and the sound was like winter wind through a graveyard. Oh, I do like you, little witch. You have such spirit. It will make breaking you so much more satisfying. The air around us began to shimmer and twist as Azrael's power manifested. Not the corruption magic we'd faced before, but something far worse, the ability to unmake reality itself. "Everyone get back," I ordered, stepping forward to face him alone. "This is between him and me." "Like hell it is," Damon said, moving to stand beside me. "We're in this together, remember?" One by one, the others moved to stand with us. Elena, my father, Alpha Thorn, even Commander Vex. United against an enemy that threatened everything we cared about. "How touching," Azrael said with mock sadness. "You still believe that friendship and loyalty can overcome absolute power. Let me show you how wrong you are." He raised his hand, and I felt something that had never happened before. My connection to the moon goddess began to waver, like a radio signal being jammed by static. "What are you doing to me?" "Showing you what 3 centuries of planning can accomplish," he said with satisfaction. "I've had a long time to study moon witch magic, little one. A long time to develop countermeasures." I reached for my power, for the divine connection that had become as natural as breathing, and found it clouded, muffled, like trying to see through dirty glass. "The final hunt begins now, Lyra Nightshade. And this time, there will be no survivors to carry on your bloodline." As darkness began to spread from his position like oil spilling across water, I realized with cold certainty that this was the moment everything had been building toward. The last moon witch, facing the last celestial hunter, with the fate of the supernatural world hanging in the balance. "Then let's finish this," I said, calling on every scrap of power, determination, and courage I possessed. Once and for all. Chapter 9. The battle between light and darkness erupted with the force of a cosmic storm. Azrael's corrupted divine power crashed against my wavering connection to the moon goddess, sending shockwaves through the fabric of reality itself. Trees aged and died instantly where his darkness touched them, while my silver light struggled to push back against the encroaching void. But something was wrong. My usual effortless connection to divine power felt like trying to breathe through water. Every spell, every calling upon the moon's strength required twice the effort for half the result. "Come on," I gasped, dodging a tendril of shadow that would have aged me a century in seconds. "Come on, work." "Having trouble, little witch?" Azrael stalked toward me through the chaos, his power continuing to spread like infection through the air around us. 300 years of preparation, and you think your raw talent can overcome my mastery? Around us, the others fought desperately to keep the expanding darkness from overwhelming our position. Elena wove containment spells that shattered almost as quickly as she could cast them. Damon and Alpha Thorn coordinated physical attacks that passed harmlessly through Azrael's form. Commander Vex and her enforcers laid down covering fire that did nothing but give us precious seconds. "Lyra," Elena called out, her voice tight with magical strain. "He's not just jamming your connection, he's corrupting the local spiritual atmosphere. The ambient divine energy here is being poisoned." Understanding crashed over me like ice water. That's how he wiped out the other moon witches. He didn't have to fight them directly, he just had to corrupt their power source. "Very good," Azrael said approvingly. "I learned long ago that it's much easier to turn a witch's own power against her than to overpower her directly. Divine magic is so pure. It rebels against the slightest contamination." His form began to shift and expand, no longer looking remotely human. Wings of shadow spread from his shoulders, his eyes blazed with cold fire, and the temperature around us dropped until our breath came out in visible puffs. "Do you want to know the truth, little witch?" he asked, his voice now carrying harmonics that spoke of cosmic exile and eternal rage. "Do you want to know why I hunt your kind with such dedication?" "Let me guess," I said, backing toward the protective circle my allies had formed around me. "You were cast out of heaven and decided to take it out on the moon goddess's chosen?" "Close, but not quite," he replied with a laugh like breaking glass. "I wasn't cast out for rebellion, little witch. I was cast out for love." The air around us shimmered, and suddenly I could see, really see, what he had been before his fall. Magnificent, terrible, beautiful in the way that only divine beings could be. An angel of justice, of protection, of divine order. I was the celestial guardian assigned to protect the first moon witches, he continued, his true form flickering between fallen angel and the elegant man he appeared to be. I watched over them, guided them, helped them master their gifts. And I fell in love with one of them. And when the divine powers found out, they declared our love an abomination, a corruption of divine purpose. They stripped me of my grace, cast me out, and ordered the destruction of every moon witch bloodline to prevent future contamination. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You're not hunting us for revenge against the goddess. You're hunting us because you blame us for your fall. I'm hunting you because your very existence is a reminder of what I lost. His power exploded outward, and several trees simply ceased to exist. Every moon which I destroy is justice for the love that was stolen from me. Understanding his motivation didn't make him any less dangerous. If anything, it made him worse, a being of cosmic power driven by centuries of pain and twisted love. Lyra, whatever you're going to do it fast. Damon called out, his silver blades smoking from contact with shadow creatures that were spawning from Azrael's power. I don't think we can hold this position much longer. I closed my eyes, trying to reach past the interference to touch my divine connection. But instead of the warm, loving presence of the moon goddess, I found only static and pain. The corruption is spreading, Elena warned. He's not just jamming your connection, he's poisoning it at the source. That's when I realized what I had to do. What I'd been avoiding because it terrified me more than facing Azrael himself. Everyone fall back to the main building, I ordered. Get as much distance between yourselves and me as possible. Lyra, no. Whatever you're thinking. I love you, I said, meeting his storm-gray eyes across the chaos. All of you. Remember that. Before anyone could stop me, I broke away from the protective circle and walked directly toward Azrael. Not to attack him, but to do something far more dangerous. Stop, I called out, and something in my tone made both Azrael and my allies freeze. I want to make a deal. Azrael's assault paused, curiosity flickering across his inhuman features.
A deal?
How delightfully unexpected. What could you possibly offer me that I cannot simply take? My willing cooperation. My power, given freely instead of taken by force. I took another step toward him, feeling the corruption in the air try to seep into my skin. In exchange for the lives of everyone here. Lyra, no. The protest came from a dozen throats at once. Interesting, Azrael mused, his power settling into a watchful stillness. And why would you do such a thing? Because they're my family, my pack, the people who saw me at my most broken and chose to stand with me anyway. I was close enough now to see the cosmic cold in his eyes, to feel the weight of his eternal exile. Because they deserve better than to die for my bloodline sins. Very noble, very touching. But what makes you think I'll honor such a bargain? I am, as you've pointed out, a fallen angel. Honesty is no longer among my virtues. Because, I said, taking the final step that brought me within arm's reach of him, I understand what you lost. And I think, deep down, you still remember what love actually means. For just a moment, Azrael's terrible power wavered. In his eyes, I caught a glimpse of the angel he had been, the protector, the guardian, the being who had loved a moon witch so deeply that he'd been willing to fall from grace rather than let her be destroyed. She's gone, I said softly. The moon witch you loved, the one you fell for, she's been dead for 300 years. Hunting her descendants won't bring her back. It won't undo your exile. It won't heal your pain. You know nothing of my pain, he whispered, but the cosmic rage in his voice was cracking, revealing the grief beneath. I know what it feels like to have your heart torn out in front of everyone you care about, I said. I know what it's like to be cast aside, rejected, told you're not worthy of love. I know what it's like to want to burn down the world rather than feel that pain. As I spoke, something extraordinary happened. The interference with my divine connection began to clear, Not because Azrael was weakening his assault, but because something else was happening. The moon goddess herself was responding to my willingness to sacrifice for others. Child, the familiar divine voice whispered through my mind, warm as starlight and fierce as a mother's love. You offer your life for others, as your ancestors did. This is the true power of moon witches, not just magic, but love that transcends self. Power flooded through me, but not the silver moonlight I was used to. This was something deeper, older, the fundamental force that connected all living things, the love that held the universe together. No, Azrael breathed, stepping back as he recognized what was happening. That's impossible. That power was sealed away. Not sealed, I said, my voice now carrying harmonics that spoke of cosmic love and divine purpose. Hidden, waiting for someone worthy to claim it. For the first time in 3 centuries, he remembered what he had been before the fall. I can feel. His voice broke as divine grace touched him for the first time since his exile. She's here. Miranda, she's here. And she was the spirit of the moon which he had loved, the one whose destruction had triggered his fall, manifested in the golden light. Beautiful, radiant, and looking at her fallen guardian with infinite compassion. My love, she said, her voice like music made manifest. My brave, foolish guardian. It's time to let go of the pain. Light erupted from me, not the silver glow of moon magic, but the warm golden radiance of pure divine love. It swept outward in waves that didn't destroy or cleanse, but transformed. Where it touched the corrupted landscape, life bloomed. Where it touched the shadow creatures, they became beings of light. And where it touched Azrael, Miranda, I'm sorry. I failed you. I couldn't protect you. You didn't fail me, Azrael.
You loved me.
And love is never a failure, no matter whether the golden light intensified, and I felt the moon goddess herself manifesting through the connection, her presence vast and loving and utterly transformative. Azrael Shadowborn. The goddess spoke through me, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic authority tempered by infinite mercy. Your exile was unjust. Your love was pure. Your pain has been punishment enough. What happened next defied every law of supernatural existence I knew. The golden light wrapped around Azrael like healing balm, and slowly, miraculously, his grace began to return. I can feel the divine light again, he whispered, staring at his hands as they began to glow with restored celestial power. After 3 centuries of darkness. Now you can let go, Miranda said, her spirit beginning to fade as the divine intervention reached its conclusion. Now you can heal. Both of you. As the cosmic light settled and the immediate crisis passed, I found myself standing in a fundamentally changed world. Azrael knelt before me, no longer a fallen angel consumed by vengeance, but a redeemed guardian overwhelmed by returned grace. The hunt is over, I said quietly. All of it. The persecution of moon witches, the corruption of divine magic, the cycle of pain and revenge that's lasted for centuries. What would you have me do? He asked, his voice now carrying the harmonics of restored divinity. How do I make amends for 3 centuries of destruction? You protect, I said simply. You guard. You do what you were created to do. Watch over those who need watching over. Help rebuild what was torn down. Behind me, I heard my chosen family approaching cautiously, amazed to discover that not only had we all survived, but the greatest threat to supernatural peace in 3 centuries had just been transformed into an ally. Lyra, Damon said softly, his hand finding mine as he reached my side. What you just did, that was impossible. I suggested with a weary smile. Insane? Ridiculously dangerous? Perfect, he finished, pulling me into his arms. Absolutely perfect. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the transformed landscape in shades of gold and promise, I looked around at the faces of the people who'd become my world. My father, proud and amazed. Elena, grinning with the joy of someone who'd just witnessed magic beyond her wildest dreams. Alpha Thorn and Commander Vex, already discussing the implications for supernatural law and pack relations. And Damon, holding me like I was something precious and irreplaceable. So what happens now? I asked. Now, Azrael said, rising to his feet with restored dignity. We rebuild. We heal. We create a world where love is celebrated rather than punished. Now, I agreed, feeling the warm presence of the moon goddess settled permanently in my heart. We build something better. Chapter 10. To 3 weeks after the confrontation that changed the supernatural world, I stood on the porch of what would soon be the new Supernatural Cooperation Center, watching dozens of volunteers from multiple packs work together to build something that had never existed before, a neutral ground where all supernatural beings could gather, learn, and resolve conflicts without bloodshed. The council approved the final architectural plans, Commander Vex said, approaching with a tablet full of official documents. Construction should be complete within 2 months. I still can't believe this is actually happening, I said, watching werewolves, witches, and even a few vampires work side by side. 6 weeks ago, I was a rejected mate hiding in the forest. Now, we're building a supernatural United Nations. 6 weeks ago, the supernatural world was fragmenting under the weight of ancient prejudices and political maneuvering, she replied. One person's courage to choose love over revenge changed everything. Are you two getting philosophical without me? Damon's voice carried warmth and amusement as he joined us on the porch. Because I have opinions about supernatural political theory. Please tell me your opinions involve more practical matters, like whether we're still on for that dinner you promised me, I said, accepting the coffee cup he offered. I'll have you know I take my dinner promises very seriously, especially when they involve the woman who literally saved the world. I didn't save the world. I just helped it remember what it was supposed to be. The soft sound of wings announced Azrael's arrival. In the weeks since his redemption, he'd taken to appearing and disappearing without warning, a habit that kept everyone on their toes but had proven invaluable for coordinating the massive changes happening across the supernatural community. The European Council has agreed to adopt the new cooperation protocols, he said without preamble. And the Asian Supernatural Alliance wants to send a delegation to observe our integration process. That's incredible news. What about the resistance groups? Shrinking daily. It's hard to argue against peace and cooperation when the alternative is returning to centuries of conflict and mistrust. He paused, his expression growing more personal. There's something else. The moon goddess has asked me to deliver a message. What kind of message? Azrael's eyes began to glow with divine light, and when he spoke, it was with the warm, loving voice of the moon goddess herself. My chosen daughter, your work in the outer world proceeds well. But there is inner work yet to be done. The heart that saved a fallen angel must now learn to trust its own healing. The divine presence faded, leaving Azrael looking slightly drained but peaceful. She's talking about my personal life, isn't she? I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Of course she is, Elena said, climbing the porch steps with a knowing smile. You've mastered cosmic-level divine magic, transformed an ancient enemy into an ally, and established a new era of supernatural cooperation. The only thing you haven't figured out is how to let yourself be happy. I am happy. I'm building a new life, working on something meaningful, surrounded by people I care about. And keeping all of us at arm's length because you're afraid of being hurt again, Damon finished quietly. The construction noise seemed to fade into background as his words hit their target. Around us, the others found reasons to be elsewhere, giving us privacy for a conversation that was apparently long overdue. I'm not. I started, then stopped, because he was right. Maybe a little. Lyra, I've been waiting for you to be ready. I've been patient because I know what Kieran's rejection did to you, how it made you question your worth. He stepped closer, his hands settling gently on my shoulders. But at some point, patience starts looking like indifference. And I need you to know that what I feel for you is anything but indifferent. Damon, I care about you. More than I should, more than is probably smart. Why isn't it smart? He asked. Why are you so afraid of letting this be real? The question hung in the air between us, and I found myself facing the truth I'd been avoiding for weeks. Because you've seen me at my worst, I whispered. You've seen me broken, desperate, clinging to any scrap of kindness. You've seen me lose control of my power, make mistakes, doubt myself. What if the person you think you care about is just the damaged version of me? What if, now that I'm stronger, now that I'm not a refugee who needs saving, you realize you don't actually want? His hands came up to cup my face, cutting off my spiral of self-doubt with gentle firmness. Lyra, look at me. I looked into those storm-gray eyes that had been my anchor through every crisis, every transformation, every moment of doubt. I didn't fall for the broken version of you. I didn't fall for the powerful version of you. I fell for you. All of you. The woman who walked into a rejection with her head held high. The woman who chose to help corrupted wolves instead of destroying them. The woman who looked at a fallen angel consumed by centuries of rage and saw someone worth saving. I fell for the woman who makes terrible coffee but excellent decisions under pressure. Who snores when she's exhausted from saving the world. Who cries during romantic movies but faces cosmic threats without flinching. His words were unraveling every defense I'd built, every reason I'd given myself to keep him at a distance. I love you, Lyra Nightshade. Not because you needed saving, not because you're magically powerful, but because you're you. Stubborn, brave, compassionate, occasionally infuriating you. Damon. And if you can't see how incredible you are, how worthy of love you are, then you haven't healed as much as you think you have. The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow, and suddenly I was crying. Not the desperate sobs of heartbreak, but the cleansing tears of finally letting go of the last remnants of shame and self-doubt that Kieran's rejection had left behind. I'm scared, I admitted. I'm terrified of being that vulnerable again, of trusting someone with my heart and having them decide I'm not enough. Then let me prove to you that not all men are idiots, he said, his thumbs brushing away my tears. Let me show you what it looks like when sound of intimate moment, walls coming down. I looked into his eyes and saw everything I'd been afraid to hope for: love without conditions, acceptance without judgment, partnership without power games. Okay, I whispered.
Okay, yes.
I love you too. I have for weeks. I needed to be sure I was choosing you for the right reasons. And what reasons are those? Because you make me laugh. Because you challenge me to be better without making me feel inadequate. Because you stood with me against impossible odds and never asked for anything in return. I paused, gathering courage for the final truth. Because you see me as an equal, not as something to protect or control or fix. When he kissed me, it was nothing like the desperate passion of my relationship with Kieran. This was deeper, steadier, the kiss of someone who knew exactly who I was and loved me anyway. The kiss was interrupted by enthusiastic applause from our friends, who had apparently been watching from what they thought was a discreet distance. Finally, Elena called out, "I was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in a closet together." "About time," my father added, his voice thick with paternal satisfaction. "Though I suppose I should have the traditional conversation with you about your intentions, Beta Cross." "My intentions, sir, are to love your daughter, support her dreams, and try to be worthy of the incredible woman she's become." "Good answer," Alpha Thorn said, stepping forward with a formal expression that made my stomach clench. "Because I have an official question for both of you." "What kind of official question?" "The Council has approved the creation of a new position, Supernatural Liaison and Magical Consultant, to the Interpack Cooperation Initiative. The job comes with significant authority, substantial resources, and the full backing of every major supernatural organization on 3 continents. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you both a job. This kind of work requires a team, someone with magical expertise, and someone with tactical and political knowledge. The Council believes you two would be perfect partners." "What would we be doing exactly?" "Mediating disputes, investigating supernatural crimes that cross pack boundaries, serving as liaisons between the human and supernatural worlds," Commander Vex explained. Essentially, being the people who handle situations that are too complicated for traditional pack justice or council enforcement. I felt excitement build in my chest, not just at the opportunity, but at the chance to work alongside Damon, to build something meaningful together. What do you think? I asked Damon. Ready to save the world on a regular basis? With you, I'm ready for anything. As our friends and family burst into congratulations and began discussing the logistics of our new positions, I found myself marveling at how far I'd come. 2 months ago, I'd been a broken woman convinced she wasn't worthy of love. Now I stood surrounded by chosen family, holding the hand of a man who loved me exactly as I was, about to embark on work that could change the supernatural world for the better. Sometimes, dear listeners, the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone to complete you. They're about finding someone who helps you remember that you were whole all along. The wind kicked up around us, carrying the sounds of wolves howling in celebration from packs across the territory. Not the twisted calls of corrupted creatures or the lonely cries of the rejected, but the joyful songs of a community coming together. So, Damon said, squeezing my hand as we watched the sun set over our new life, what do you think our first case will be? Knowing our luck? Probably something involving ancient curses, international incidents, and at least 3 different types of shapeshifters. Can't wait, he said, and kissed me again under the rising moon. Chapter 11. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle in the heart of Crescent Moon territory, wearing a dress the color of moonlight and trying not to fidget with nerves. Around us, representatives from dozens of packs had gathered for what was being called the first interpack celebration ceremony in recorded history. Stop fidgeting, Elena murmured from beside me, adjusting the circlet of silver and moonstone that marked my new official status as supernatural liaison. You've faced down fallen angels. A bonding ceremony should be easy. Facing fallen angels didn't involve as many people watching me declare my feelings in public, I replied, smoothing down the flowing skirts of my dress. What if I trip? What if I forget my words? What if? What if you stop overthinking and enjoy the fact that you're about to bond with a man who adores you? Hannah interrupted, stepping up to fuss with my hair one final time. Some of us have been waiting months for this ceremony. The drums shifted to a more ceremonial rhythm, and I felt my heart skip as the crowd began to part. Through the gap came Damon, looking absolutely devastating in traditional ceremonial attire, leather pants, a vest that left his arms bare to display the new tattoos marking our professional partnership, and a circlet that matched mine. Has he always been that handsome, or is it just the ceremonial lighting? I whispered. Both. Now stop gawking and remember to breathe. Damon approached with a fluid grace that had first caught my attention all those months ago, but now his eyes held something that made my knees weak. Absolute love and devotion, mixed with just enough heat to remind me of what we'd be doing after the ceremony. You look incredible, he said quietly as he took his place across from me in the center of the circle. You clean up pretty well yourself, Beta Cross. Alpha Thorn stepped forward, resplendent in his own ceremonial robes, carrying an ancient staff that had been used for pack bonding ceremonies for over 2 centuries. Friends, allies, and pack members, he began, his voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd. We gather tonight under the full moon to witness something that represents the new world we're building together, a bonding that crosses pack lines, unites different types of supernatural beings, and celebrates love that has grown from partnership and mutual respect. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd, and I caught sight of faces that marked how far we'd all come. My father, beaming with pride. Commander Vex, who'd become an unexpected friend. Even Kieran, who'd brought Seraphina and offered genuine congratulations with no trace of the awkwardness I'd feared. Lyra Nightshade and Damon Cross, you have chosen to bond not just as mates, but as partners in life and work. You have proven your commitment to each other through trials that would have broken lesser bonds. Do you come here tonight freely, with open hearts and honest intentions? I do, we said in unison, the words carrying easily in the crisp night air. Then speak your intentions to the moon, to your packs, and to each other. Damon stepped forward first, taking my hands in his warm, calloused ones. Lyra, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion I could see in his eyes. 6 months ago, you crashed into my life like a force of nature, wounded, powerful, and absolutely determined to heal on your own terms. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd at his description. I fell in love with your strength first, then your compassion, then your terrible taste in coffee and your habit of overthinking everything. More laughter, this time including mine. But mostly I fell in love with your heart, the part of you that looked at enemies and saw people who could be redeemed, that chose love over revenge even when you had every right to choose destruction. My eyes were already getting misty, and he wasn't even halfway through. I promised to stand beside you as an equal partner, never behind you as a protector or ahead of you as a leader. I promise to challenge you when you need challenging, support you when you need support, and love you exactly as you are while helping you become whoever you want to be. I promise to share your burdens, celebrate your victories, and face whatever the supernatural world throws at us together. I promise to be your partner in all things, work, life, and love. I heard several people in the crowd sniffle and had to blink back tears of my own before I could speak. Damon, I began, my voice only slightly shaky. When I met you, I was convinced I was broken beyond repair. I thought my worth was tied to being chosen by someone else, that my value came from being the perfect Luna for someone else's pack. You helped me discover that I wasn't broken. I was just becoming something new, something stronger. Something that couldn't be contained by other people's expectations or limited by their fears. You saw me at my absolute worst and decided I was worth fighting for. You stood with me against impossible odds without ever making me feel like I owed you anything in return. You loved me not because I needed saving, but because you genuinely liked who I was. I promised to trust you with my heart, my fears, and my dreams. I promise to be your partner in building the life we both want, not just accepting whatever life hands us. I promise to face our challenges together, celebrate our successes together, and never forget that we chose each other freely. And I promise to keep working on making better coffee, even though we both know it's a lost cause. The crowd burst into laughter and applause, the formal ceremony dissolving into the kind of joyful celebration that marked the best pack gatherings. By the authority vested in me by the Crescent Moon Pack, the Supernatural Council, and the blessing of the Moon Goddess herself, Alpha Thorn declared, raising his ceremonial staff, I declare you bonded mates, partners in life and love, united in purpose and spirit. As if summoned by his words, moonlight intensified around us, bathing the entire ceremony in silver radiance that felt like the goddess's personal blessing. My children, the familiar divine voice whispered through the gathered crowd, audible to every supernatural being present, may your love be a beacon for others, may your partnership heal old wounds, and may your bond grow stronger with each challenge you face together. The divine blessing left everyone in awed silence for a moment before the celebration exploded into joyful chaos. You may kiss your mate, Alpha Thorn said with a grin. Damon's kiss was everything our first kiss had been and more: love, promise, passion, and the absolute certainty that we were choosing exactly the right path. What followed was the kind of party that became pack legend. Music, dancing, enough food to feed an army, and the sight of supernatural beings from dozens of different communities celebrating together without a single conflict. I'm proud of you, little moon, my father said when he found me during a brief break from well-wishers. Your mother would have loved this. Seeing you happy, seeing the world changing for the better. I wish she could have been here. Who says she wasn't? He nodded toward the moonlight that still seemed unusually bright. I have a feeling all the ancestors were watching tonight. Elena appeared with a glass of champagne and a knowing smile. So, how does it feel to be officially mated to the most sought-after beta in 3 states?
Exhausting.
Do you know how many people have asked me for love advice tonight? Apparently, successfully bonding with Damon makes me some kind of relationship expert. Maybe it does. You've proven that the right kind of love can literally change the world. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate, and Damon appeared at my elbow as if summoned. Mrs. Cross, he said, offering his hand with exaggerated formality, would you honor me with a dance? Mrs. Cross. I raised an eyebrow. I'm keeping my name. Thank you very much. The world knows me as Lyra Nightshade.
Fine.
Lyra Nightshade Cross, would you dance with your devoted mate? Much better. Yes, I would love to dance with my devoted mate. As we moved together on the improvised dance floor, I found myself marveling again at how perfectly we fit together, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Do you think it will always be this good? I asked quietly. It will be different, he said honestly. There will be challenges, disagreements, days when the world feels too heavy and nights when we're too tired to be romantic. But this, the foundation we've built, the love we've chosen, the partnership we've created, this will last. Good, I said, resting my head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. Because I plan to keep you for a very long time. Our peaceful moment was interrupted by a commotion near the edge of the gathering. Not dangerous, excited. People were pointing at the sky and gasping in wonder. What's everyone looking at? I asked, turning in Damon's arms to follow their gaze. Above us, the aurora borealis danced across the night sky in impossible shades of silver and gold. Impossible because we were nowhere near the polar regions where such displays typically occurred. A gift, Azrael said, materializing beside us with his usual dramatic flair. From those of us who remember what the world was like before love was considered a weakness. I looked up at the impossible beauty painting the heavens and understood. This wasn't just a pretty light show, it was a sign. A promise that the old ways of fear and separation were ending, that love and cooperation were creating literal magic in the world. And there, dear listeners, under lights that shouldn't have been possible, surrounded by people who'd become family, in the arms of the man who'd helped me remember my own worth, I finally understood what happily ever after really meant. It wasn't about having a perfect life with no challenges. It wasn't about being rescued or fixed or completed by someone else. It was about choosing to build something beautiful together, day after day, challenge after challenge. It was about knowing that whatever came next, and in our line of work, there would definitely be a next, we'd face it together as equals, as partners, as mates who'd chosen each other freely and completely. Ready for whatever comes next? Damon asked, his arms tightening around me as we watched the impossible lights dance overhead. With you? I'm ready for anything. 2 years later, I stood on the balcony of our home overlooking the Supernatural Cooperation Center, watching the blood moon rise over the mountains. The irony wasn't lost on me. Exactly 3 years ago, a blood moon had witnessed my public rejection and the beginning of the worst period of my life. Tonight, that same celestial event illuminated everything I'd built from the ashes of that devastation. You're brooding again, Damon said, stepping onto the balcony with 2 steaming mugs. I can tell because you get that faraway look and forget to blink. I'm not brooding. I'm reflecting philosophically on the cyclical nature of time and celestial events.
Right.
And I'm not completely besotted with my brilliant, occasionally dramatic wife. Occasionally dramatic? I prefer appropriately expressive for someone who regularly saves the supernatural world. He handed me one of the mugs. His coffee had indeed improved dramatically over the past 2 years and settled beside me on the cushioned bench we'd installed for exactly these kinds of evening conversations. What's really on your mind? And don't say nothing, because you've been extra thoughtful all day. I leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and leather and home that always meant safety to me. I got a letter today. From Serafina. Everything okay? I thought she and Kieran were doing well in their new territory. They are. She's pregnant. She wanted me to be one of the first to know, and I paused, surprised by my own emotional response. She asked if I'd consider being the baby's godmother. That's big. How do you feel about it? Good, actually. Really good. 3 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be genuinely happy for Sarah and Kieran, that I'd want to be part of their child's life, I would have laughed. Or cried. Probably cried. But now, all I feel is joy for them. And maybe a little smug satisfaction that they named their new pack territory New Beginnings after something I said during our last mediation session. My phone buzzed with an incoming message, and I glanced at the screen with the automatic tension that came from being on call for supernatural emergencies 24 hours a day. Elena, I said, reading the message. The vampire conclave in Romania has agreed to the new territory sharing protocols. Apparently, our success with the Pacific Northwest integration convinced them that cooperation actually works better than centuries of territorial disputes. That's what, the 15th major supernatural organization to adopt our protocols this year? 17, actually. Sometimes I can't believe this is our life. Damon reached into his jacket and pulled out an official-looking envelope that made my stomach clench with familiar worry. Please tell me that's not another crisis that requires us to travel to another continent and mediate between ancient enemies who communicate primarily through murder attempts. Not exactly, he said, holding the envelope just out of my reach with a smile that was equal parts loving and mischievous. This is actually a very special kind of official communication. Damon Cross, if you're about to surprise me with some new impossible responsibility. Read it, he said, handing me the envelope. I opened the envelope with the kind of caution reserved for potentially explosive magical artifacts, then blinked at the official letterhead. It's from the International Council of Supernatural Governance, I said slowly. They want to offer us joint leadership of the new Global Supernatural Cooperation Initiative. That's essentially making us the supernatural equivalent of the United Nations Secretary-General. Both of us. Together. Keep reading. The position would involve establishing permanent headquarters in Switzerland, coordinating supernatural affairs across all 7 continents, and... I looked up at him with wide eyes. They're offering us our own small country. Literally. A sovereign supernatural nation where beings from all communities can live together. This is insane. This is impossible. This is what happens when 2 people prove that love and cooperation can literally change the world, he said softly. The question is, do we want it? I looked out over the valley below us, where the lights of the Cooperation Center twinkled like earthbound stars. In the 2 years since we'd opened, it had become a beacon for supernatural beings seeking peaceful resolution to conflicts that had seemed unsolvable. It would mean leaving here. Leaving the place where we built our life together. It would, but it would also mean building something even bigger. Something that could prevent the kind of suffering you went through, that could stop conflicts before they start. You want to do it. I want to do it with you. I want to build something that makes the world better for every supernatural being who's ever felt rejected, displaced, or caught between communities. I thought about the letter I'd received from Serafina, about the new life she and Kieran were creating. I thought about all the letters we received from young supernatural beings who'd found hope in our work, who'd seen proof that different species could coexist peacefully. We'd be creating a place where no one would ever have to choose between their nature and their community, I said slowly. Where moon witches wouldn't have to hide, where vampires and werewolves could be neighbors, where fallen angels could find redemption. Where kids like you could grow up knowing they're valuable exactly as they are. The rightness of it settled over me like moonlight, warm and certain, and absolutely perfect. Yes, I said, turning to face him fully. Yes, let's build a supernatural nation founded on love and cooperation instead of fear and territory. His kiss tasted like coffee and moonlight and the promise of impossible dreams coming true. Of course, I said when we broke apart, we'll need to finish our current caseload first and figure out what to do with our house. And probably learn at least 5 more languages. And you'll need to work on delegating instead of trying to personally mediate every supernatural conflict on 3 continents. I do not try to personally mediate every. I stopped because he was giving me that look. Okay, fine. I may have slight control issues when it comes to preventing supernatural wars. The soft sound of wings announced Azrael's arrival, because apparently, our redeemed celestial guardian had developed a supernatural ability to appear whenever we made major life decisions. I see you've read the council's offer, he said without preamble, settling gracefully on the balcony railing in a way that would have looked impossible for anyone who was— Let me guess, you had something to do with this? I may have provided a glowing recommendation when they asked for references. I may have also mentioned that the two of you have personally prevented approximately 17 supernatural wars in the past 18 months. 17? I thought it was only 12. You stopped 5 more before they escalated enough for you to notice. The Korean fox spirit incident, the Australian bunyip territorial dispute, the Scandinavian troll integration crisis. We really need a better filing system. Azrael's expression grew more serious, and I felt the familiar tingle that meant he was about to deliver a message from higher powers. When he spoke, it was with the warm, loving voice of the moon goddess herself. My chosen daughter, you have exceeded every hope I held when I first touched your bloodline with divine power. You have proven that love is indeed the strongest force in any universe, that healing is possible even for the most ancient wounds. The path ahead will not be easy. Building a new nation, integrating dozens of supernatural communities, creating laws and customs that honor every being's nature, this will test you in ways you have not yet imagined. But you will not face these challenges alone. You have chosen a partner whose strength complements your own, whose love supports your growth, whose dreams align with yours. Together, you will create something beautiful. The divine presence faded, leaving us in contemplative silence under the blood moon that had once marked my devastation and now illuminated my greatest triumph. You know, dear listeners, when I first spoke to you from the depths of my heartbreak, I thought my story was about loss, about learning to survive rejection, to build a life from the wreckage of broken dreams. But I was wrong. My story was never about surviving heartbreak. It was about discovering that the person I became after my world fell apart was someone I never had the courage to be when life was easy. It was about learning that the love worth having isn't the love that chooses you despite your flaws. It's the love that sees your strength, celebrates your power, and helps you become the fullest version of yourself. It was about discovering that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is also the catalyst for the best thing that will ever happen to you. As we sat together under the blood moon, planning our impossible future and marveling at our extraordinary present, I realized that my rejection had been the greatest gift Kieran could have given me. Because if he hadn't been brave enough to admit we were wrong for each other, I never would have been free to find the person who was absolutely right for me. Ready for our next adventure, Mrs. Nightshade Cross? Damon asked, his arms tightening around me as we watched shooting stars streak across the sky above our supernatural nation-to-be. With you? I'm ready for anything the universe wants to throw at us. And as the blood moon reached its zenith, painting our world in shades of silver and promise, I knew with absolute certainty that our greatest adventures were still ahead of us. After all, dear listeners, this isn't really an ending. It's just the beginning of happily ever after.